Hello, I'm Craig Constantine. Today I'm talking with Julie Duffy. I should say this evening. We're in the same time zone. Welcome, Julie.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I thought when you scheduled, I thought you were east of me, and then you scheduled in my evening, and I'm like, are you a night owl? And it turns out apparently that is actually a thing, that you are also a night
Yes,
owl.
and technically I am a little bit east of you.
A little bit. Yeah, all
Not
right, by a couple of miles. Southeast of me. Okay, fine. You win. You're ahead of me. The Australians always, they're like, well, I'm calling in from tomorrow, and like the future's bright for at least 17 hours. So we had a mutual friend of ours, a mutual podcasting friend, say, you need to talk to Julie. I'm like, okay, I'm down. I talk to anybody. I don't mean that
Oh,
in a
thanks.
derogatory way, but I just love talking to people about podcasting. I and we talked about this beforehand, but this is where I'm going to start. I scrolled all the way back. By the way, what number are you on? Roughly.
246.
Awesome. Everybody listens to the show. That's like my shtick. Anytime I catch a podcast, I'm like, what number are you on? That's awesome, because podcasting is a lonely thing. And I think people need to hear that. And actually, that's actually really awesome to get to a 3-digit number. And I scrolled all the way back to the beginning, and I noticed, I did the same thing. I'm not criticizing you. I noticed that your earliest episodes have numbers on the front, which I used to do too. And the first one is 001. And I was like, oh, a special place in my heart. And I went, this is a process person. This is somebody who went, I'm going to call it episode 1. Oh yeah. But then when I get to 10, I'm going to have a weird thing with a 0 in the sorting. So I'll put a 0, but if I'm going to say I'm going to do 10, I really ought to be in for 100. So I just want to first point at that and say, like, we're kind of repeating some of our conversation here, but do you agree with me when I say you're a process person if you put zeros on the front of episode numbers?
I was really surprised when you said that because I don't I've lived my whole life being told I'm disorganized and losing my keys and all that stuff. Can't find my glasses. So it was surprising to hear you say that, but when I thought about it, it makes sense possibly because I'm disorganized. When I do something, I need a checklist. I need,
Save
you know,
myself.
and also I'd been doing the Story a Day challenge for a while, and I was numbering blog posts. I was numbering the days of the challenge, and I very
Mm.
quickly, of course, realized that if I numbered day one, I would lose it in my files on my
Mm.
computer. So, and like you say, I adding the 10 just seemed, a little
Yeah, well,
ambitious, right?
come at me, bro. We're doing 999. Exactly.
Maybe I should have put 3 zeros. I don't know.
Oh, don't get me started. I did, when I did episode 100, the person that works with me on the show, we had this conversation about the numbers and how excited we were to stop typing the zeros on the front because we're so sick of typing. And now I have subsequently gone back and basically erased the numbers off. But anyway, um, process. So you mentioned storyaday.org. You didn't mention the
Indeed.
domain name. Storyaday.org, where you run May and some Septembers, you run a writing challenge. And when I said process and you said no, the second thought that I had was, wait a minute. You talk about how important it is for, I'm not a writer, for writers to finish.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that's process. That's beginning, middle, ending. This is a process. And I'll also say a lot of the things that you're describing, card catalogs, libraries, research, history, a lot of this is about visualizing the end. What does done look like? And to me, that's all process. So what I want to ask is, without maybe exploding your writing, like I broke my writing because I explained it, that whole thing about don't look at how it works because you'll
Oh,
break it.
no.
Um, do you find that there's a particular place where writers get stuck? Like, is it in the starting? Is it in the middling? Oh, middling's the wrong word. Is it in the middle or is it in the finish?
The answer to that is yes. Um,
As soon as I put the question, I'm like, that's a terrible question,
well,
Craig.
no, it's not a terrible question because it depends on the writer and it depends on the project. Some people have a terrible time getting started because when you're about to start writing, you could write about anything, and when you can write about
Mm,
anything, you could write about everything. And if you can write
right.
about everything, then what do you choose, right? Some people have trouble getting started, but some people get started fine. And I think this applies to podcasting too. I mean, any creative process, any creative act, you have to get started, and then so you have to get over that fear that it needs to be perfect, And then you have to when you get into the middle, it kind of loses its shape a little bit. And possibly not with a podcast, but with art and with writing, the middle is where you complicate things. Otherwise, it doesn't get interesting. I guess even with a
Good
podcast
point.
conversation, right? You've got your intro ready. You know you're going to say hello. You're going to introduce the guest. But like the conversation in the middle is kind of go wibbly wobbly a bit, and you have to find the path and keep going. Now, when you do it live, you don't really have any choice. You have to keep going. But if you're a writer, you can stop and walk away. And when you complicate things, you throw things at your characters, that gets complicated and it seems unmanageable. And a lot of people get stuck there. But I think the reason they really get stuck there is because they don't have that good vision of the end. They don't know what they're aiming at. So, and I don't think you need that before you start, but some point in the middle, you need to figure out, oh, this is going to end, and I think I'm going here, and here's how I want to leave the audience feeling at the end. So this is how I have to drive that way. So yes, people get stuck at different points depending on who they are. But that's one of the reasons that I keep pushing people to get to the end, because once you're there, even if the rest of it's a mess, you know what the piece wants to be. And then you can go in and tidy up. So there's a long answer to your question.
No, that's not a long. That's a good answer. There's so many. When Craig does that, okay, the brain is a little weird. Sometimes it locks up because I said too many things I want to say at the same time. I'm like, I got 9 questions. What is it about podcasting? So first of all, you're doing host on mic, just you talking to stuff.
Mostly.
So hundreds of those episodes, and host on mic I suck at. I'm just going to call myself out. I think I've done like 5 and they're really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how to fix that. Just do a bunch more, which I'm working on. But I'm wondering if you've found certain parts of your writing skill set that help you. So one I could think of is like if you're working from scripted or outlined material, well, that's clearly writing, Craig. So that would apply. That's an obvious one. But I'm wondering if there are skills that you, in hindsight, and maybe you recognize this from on episode 100, but at some point you look back and you go, oh, I really didn't think about story arc or storytelling or, I don't know, character development. I don't know diddly about writing. Are there any things that surprised you that were a skill from writing that actually carried through into your particular format of podcasting?
I think I am a little long-winded and could use some editing. So that's why I mostly write. So the interesting thing for me about podcasting has been that I don't edit as if I can help it, because otherwise it wouldn't get done. So I
Amen.
just go, and if I have a guest on, I'll edit. Sometimes I interview people, but yeah, one of the reasons that I write is because you have the luxury of going back and finding the right word. So when I started podcasting, I actually used at first Anchor, the live service where you just, and back in the days when you just mashed a button and talked and then mashed it again. I think it's more sophisticated now, but it was live. And that was the only way. I had
Right.
made podcasts, I'd played with the technology, and I'd made those first few episodes, but I spent so much time going in and trying to tweak it and make it perfect that I wasn't getting anything out. I wasn't shipping it in Seth Godin's parlance. So I used that Anchor platform just to kind of get me doing it live, and it was literally live. And I know people nowadays who will go live on Facebook or live on YouTube just to get over the fear of talking in a continuous way without being able to stop and edit. So for me, the skills of writing don't really apply, but there are some skills I've learned from copywriting rather, and marketing, which come in more with the podcast, because if you're making a sales video or something, you'll have a script which has a hook and then a story and then
Turning point.
teaching points and then summing call to action and then summing things up. So as I've learned more about that world, that's probably bled more into the podcasting, because I'm like, oh, I should probably tell them what I'm going to be talking about, and then I should probably tell them a little story, and then I should remember to tell them something at the end.
All the things I don't do.
Yeah, but if I'm having a conversation with somebody, if somebody's on as a guest, it'll just be a conversation, and then I might remember to do an outro or something. So I don't know that the writing I mean, a facility with words is a thing,
Do you
but
ever feel like sometimes I worry about I'm not worried about it today. Sometimes I worry about bludgeoning people with vocabulary. Like sometimes I'm a fan of Aldous Huxley's and not just the standard classics, but just like his essays and things. And sometimes I read them and I'm just like, oh, that's the perfect word, you know? So sometimes I feel like I have the perfect word and then I'm afraid to say it because I'm just like, I feel like I'm going to sound like there's got to be a word for bludgeoning people with the dictionary. Do you ever feel like when you're talking to guests on your show that you find yourself like double clutching on language or word choice because you're like, oh, that's the writerly thing for me to say, but because I do
no,
that to
because my
myself.
guests are writers. So
Ah, well played.
we say things like "methinks," and nobody, nobody bats an
Nobody
eyelid.
twitches. They're just like, well played on the green in two. Golf clap.
Indeed. Oh, you definitely should be called Craig if you're talking about golf. In case people haven't noticed, I'm from Scotland, so yeah. But no, I don't. I don't. I love words so much that, and I grew up always loving words. And to be a grown up has been a real gift because you're able to just, well, maybe it's just when you hit your 40s, but you're able to be yourself, right? You don't have to dial down your language because people are going to make fun of you for being a snob or for being pretentious. And like, this is my podcast. If I want to say anti-disestablishmentarianism, I will.
I love it. No, I'm completely with you. I have a bunch of shticks, like done a couple of episodes, and one of my shticks is I sometimes find that I'm on my social media soapbox and be like, how did I get on that? So I'll be like, let me check. No, okay, I'm gonna try and stay off it. So there are things that I come back to, and I try not to be clever on purpose because I think, well, I'm damn certain that being clever is never the right thing. Like, no, Craig, don't do that.
Well, it's hard to
Um,
be clever and be authentic. And I think that's one of the great things about podcasting
well, I can be an
is
authentic smartass. One of the things about
smartass is
podcast.
one thing. Yeah, but that's, I mean, when I'm talking to people about writing, I will encourage them to kill the ghost of their fifth grade English teacher because
Mm,
they encourage people to write in this very formal way that nobody wants to read. Like Dickens wrote like that because he was Dickens and that's how people talked then. We're not doing that now. So in conversation like this, I don't think it, I mean, I think if you're using jargon and you're being like using industry jargon or marketing jargon, and that's kind of excluding people. But if you're just using
right.
words that come naturally to you, then I think people get a sense of who you are by the words that you choose. So
Mm.
you should choose Craig's words.
That made me so choice of words and that made me think of and I'm not going to. Holy crap! It's right here.
Oh,
Wow,
was it
that doesn't happen
planned?
very often. Um, so I'm guessing this is not an English name because that's spelled weird. I'm thinking it's Henri Nouwen. I haven't finished ingesting this quote, but I just wrote this down today. To listen is, oh, now I suddenly feel like there's an author listening to me recite. To listen is very hard because it asks of us so much interior stability that we no longer need to prove ourselves by speeches, arguments, statements, or declarations. True listeners no longer have an inner need to make their presence known. They are free to receive, welcome, to accept. I love when I'm able to find a quote. So when you were just talking, my mind went to that idea, and I thought, my personal opinion, the reason I'm so good at this is because I've learned to like be okay with, oh right, I'm supposed to be talking now. Like I get lost. I mean, yes, I have things to say in this moment, but I don't feel like I have to wait, like hurry up and stop so that I can talk next. Um, and I'm guessing that you probably have a pretty refined words into sentences, putting similar sense of that because as an author, you would be comfortable going, and like figuring it out, just like making
Yeah.
space for I don't know, one doesn't know. I don't know what your thoughts are on that quote.
Oh, that quote is. I mean, I wanted to just sit here and leave dead air after you said it because
Oh, thank you.
like,
That's the
that would
biggest
be
compliment that podcasters can pay is that I didn't want to make a sound.
well. That's and I think a lot of us in our daily lives and probably in our jobs, we get that it's a rat race. It's a competition to have the last word and say the next clever thing. And so then we forget that in daily life, conversation's not that. It's listening to what somebody else has to say and like having that moment to go, huh, and not be preparing your answer as they're talking. And so few of us actually remember to do that in daily life. So maybe this is something that we can do as we listen to conversation on podcasts, is like practice that. And for anyone who's listening and thinking about interviewing, there is nothing wrong with leaving an uncomfortable silence, because if you leave a silence, the other person will fill it and they will say something interesting. But you have to be comfortable waiting for that to happen. He's doing it now, folks.
I was gonna see. Let's see who talks next. Yeah, no, you're making like 11D7 really insightful. Like if you're listening and you're a podcaster and you're new to this, press rewind. Masterclass just happened. I think that it took me way too many, like 30, 40, 50, 120 episodes to get comfortable going, huh? Because the other person just knocked me off my chair, figuratively. It's like, I think I've ever been knocked off my chair for real in a podcast, but conceptually just been like, I don't know what to say in response to that. So as you were describing that, conversation is my shtick, literally. My personal mission is to create better conversation, to spread understanding and compassion. Podcasting is one of the things. Anytime somebody says the C word, I get excited. I think that it's important for people to remember podcasting conversations are really artificial. I mean, if you have a great conversation with a friend or a partner, at some point somebody gets up and goes to the bathroom or gets another glass of wine or like there's all this other stuff that happens in the space. So first of all, we're running a video call here so we can see each other. But you can't, when I wave my hand, you can't feel the air. You can't, there's like a wood stove burning, or you can't, it's like you have a completely different universe of experience. So there's so many things that are removed when you're working virtually. And then so many constraints placed. It's like, oh, I'm supposed to be the host. You're supposed to be the guest. I'm supposed to be asking questions and we're supposed to be talking, blah, 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 blah. So I just think that there's joy in like letting go of the structure in my head. And now I'm wondering, story structure, like, are there different kinds of thought processes that lead to different types of stories when you're writing? And if there'd be a parallel, I draw, like, I grab random ideas and just glue them together and ask them as a question. And I'm wondering, there's certain kinds of thought processes that I cultivate to have a good conversation with a pair of microphones. And I'm wondering, does it work like that when you're trying to write? And then I'm wondering if we have parallels that the two of us can tease out maybe in thought processes in creation of podcasts. And I could be talking through my hat.
No, that's really interesting because I think when people start writing, they write for the love of it. They read a book as a kid and they're like, I want to write a story. And they write a story and somebody says, that's great. And then when you get a little bit older, we start learning to analyze writing and we start learning about story structure and the hero's journey and the rising tension and all those things that people have done to deconstruct stories in an effort to understand how to replicate some good thing about storytelling. And there are structures that underlie certain types of stories. Western storytelling tends to have that beginning, middle, end thing with a crisis and a resolution and blah. So there are definitely story structures, but there are lots of different things to do. And I really like the fact that you say you're not a writer, and then you had that question about, are there thought processes that precede the writing that will come up with a different type of story? Because I think you're absolutely right. Like, if someone is, one of the things I work on with writers a lot is not the technicalities of writing. I think they can go read a book for that. They can Google a particular technique.
Strunk, right?
They can, yeah, exactly. They can find techniques. So one of the things I try and work on with writers is that mindset part, the giving yourself permission, getting yourself in the right mood, getting yourself to the desk, building a process, building a practice. Oh, I am a process person. See, I did
say it. I was about to go like this. I'm gesturing at the screen, like,
So yeah, so I think like that thing, but I haven't heard it expressed in a way that like are there thought processes, because people will talk about getting their environment right or picking a story structure that they want
Mm,
to write to, and I think that's kind of like step five. But thinking through like how's my energy, like if you're going to write a high energy scene, you're going to write a fight scene, you need to get yourself kind of in that like physical and mental place. So I do think yes, there are definitely there are mental preparations you can make for any artistic endeavor, any creative endeavor that will be reflected. Like if you're really down and you've had a terrible day and you just had a fight with someone and you try and do something creative, it's going to be kind
you're
of
Chopin, right?
sludgy, right?
Guess what you're
And
gonna write.
yeah, you're very, very sad. But if you want to write the happy love scene, then you're going to have to do something before you put pen to paper. You're going to have to like put on some romantic music or dance or do something to change your state. So yeah, that's a great question.
Hmm. This is gonna be a surprise, but I'm watching the time tick away. So I'm thinking that's probably a terrific place to stop. As much as I hate ever to stop these conversations, I'm going to say that's a wonderful place to end. Julie, it was a pleasure to meet you, to get a chance to hang out and talk. And hopefully, this won't be the last time we get to chat. So thanks for joining me this evening.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was so fun and so interesting to talk about the art of conversation and how we put it into people's ears.